we good?
We're good.
Okay. Is it also looking at me?
It is.
Okay, got it. So this is a super non-serious talk, just meant to be kind of like an opener before the main topic. Don't take anything I say seriously to start out. So this is going to be a talk about graphology and what your code is saying about you, kind of like what you don't know you're saying through your code. So graphology is the study of human personality through handwriting. And so, it was really popular in like the middle of last century. They really thought that they could analyze someone's handwriting and derive all these character traits, like if they're a good leader or if they're right for a project manager role. I mean, it was used in interviewing. The Vatican even used it when they were evaluating cardinals and popes. So it like really had some steam before it was largely debunked as pseudoscience. But that doesn't mean like we can't have fun with it and maybe apply some of those things into how we write code. We don't have handwriting, but we have other little tells that we're going to go into. So let's start really small, just one letter, the letter L. So a looped L, you have big hopes and dreams. This is someone who's very innocent, AKA in your code, this would show up as dependencies, all of them, every dependency that you want. And guess what? None of them are mapped to a version. They're all curated, and you just trust. This is someone who's never woken up at midnight to fix something someone else did. On the other hand, the retraced L, technical term, you have had your hopes and dreams squelched. So this is the experienced developer. Smallest of dependencies. They are in control. They know exactly what's going into their app. All right. Also, most of them are pinned. And the only thing that's like not pinned is a tilde and not a caret. So let's go to the letter O. There are a lot of different ways to write an O. I'm going to focus on this one. And as you can see, there's a big missing area here. In your code, the person who writes this O is going to leave a lot of to-do comments in their code. If you see a lot of to-dos, you can know this person not going to finish the job. Too lazy to write an O. All right, this is my favorite letter. The letter Y. There's so much that goes into letter Y. So one line down, no movement. This person keeps to themselves. They are very narrow. This one is narrow and lazy. It's a loner with a lack of drive. They can't even get down to the basement. This Y, this one's interesting. If you look it up, people who write their Y like that with a really sharp angle, there's a lot of presidents and dictators with that signature, that character mark in their signature. It's actually pretty impressive, like Mussolini, Hitler, Stalin, some of our more recent presidents, like a lot of examples of very sharp letters. Going down here, this Y, so this is exaggerated imagination and sex drive. This Y writer goes down, they go left, they go up, they go right, they go all over the place, and they finish with a big flourish. So if you write your Ys like that, good for you. I'm happy for you. But you might be asking, how can I know if my coworker is, open like that? How can I make sure that what I'm submitting in my PR doesn't let people know that I might, be that way? And the thing that I came up with is, if you have emojis in your comments, I am looking at you a little bit differently. Yeah, you can't use emojis as variable names, but that would be even worse. I'm sure that'll be supported one day.
You can use Greek letters, though. I'm surprised.
You can, yeah. Oh,
Well, I was surprised that you can have like just 80 characters as your variable.
So, all right, continuing. Pressure is also a big part of the graphology analysis. If you write really hard, you've got a lot of pent up anger. That's stuff like you haven't worked through and you're kind of taking it out on the piece of paper. So the analysis that I came up with is if you have MX cherry greens, which every time you hit a letter, it makes a super loud click and you're disturbing everyone at your office and probably like the floor or two above you, like give that person a hug, just let them know it's okay. All right. Very interesting. It's also been used to analyze serial killers. On the left, we have a serial killer, not very well known one, Thomas Kane. And then on the right is Jack the Ripper. And what they found with serial killers, or some of them, is that they have no respect for boundaries. I mean, every word is like overlapping and that kind of, you can take that association into real life and they don't respect other people. So how do you see that in your code? Came up with a couple examples, a kind of a stretch, but and the hard part about coding is that we oftentimes have to are forced into very regimented code. So there's not a lot of examples, but if you do something as obstructive and like a border crossing as this, that's a huge red flag. Someone put that on Programming Horror on Reddit, and it was like too good not to put on here. So yeah, that's troublesome. The other thing that I found that might be indicative of such a mind is using a white theme IDE. Be careful around this person. Okay, we're gonna get into the slant. So if you write left or right, it can mean you have some emotional trauma. Going to the left means you're kind of like stuck in the past and you're having trouble moving forward. When I see this, I think of a DB admin. Like they are very private. They're super concerned with security. If we still did handwriting analysis, I think this would be a good one. Just make all your DB admins, like make sure they have some trauma. And I was gonna say one other thing about this one. Like they're very unavailable. So when you reach out to them, you're usually getting like 3 or 4 word responses, and that's about it. And to wrap this up before we go much further, so this is the word and the "in" in the middle is very interesting because it's the least amount of effort possible to write that in. I mean, this person really took some shortcuts. And when I think about this, and I think about like who has that trait, I think about Vim users. Everything's a shortcut. They cannot be bothered to go and hit that mouse. So just know you're dealing with kind of a terse person when you see someone using Vim. Yeah, so I hope you learned something. I don't know what that would be, but thank you for listening. That's it.
That was awesome.
Cool.
Yeah. sense.
And
All right.
now you're
Sweet.
Center stage.
How's my audio? Good, bad, ugly?
Should be good.
All right, sweet. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about user-submitted content. I'm Dan. I'm an engineer at Class Dojo. So some of you parents may use the stuff that I work on day to day. We're going to talk about user-generated content. And kind of the simplest part of that is plain text. Turns out it's not actually particularly easy. Character encodings are a pain. Oh, we should increase the screen. I'm betting. Internationalization is hard. There's an incredible talk. If you haven't seen this talk, that's like my pitch about all the crazy stuff that happens in plain text land. The simplest kind of incarnation of that, and I'm kind of going through this mostly because a lot of this stuff winds up being missed as people kind of get involved in like the modern framework land. Input tags really easy. You can have a bunch of text and it's on a value prop on the DOM node, so you can access it that way. I tried pasting new lines in here. It doesn't work. You cannot put a new line in. If somebody has a trick for getting a new line into one of these, I'm curious. There's also multi-line, which is the same basic idea. All pretty straightforward. Start putting it together into a form. Server interaction used to be easy. It's not anymore. This is what a form would look like. You would have an endpoint on your server that the action would point to. You'd have a field. The name of the field would be there. Then it would show up. You can type something in. Hello. And then you would get back. Oh, man. The sizing's hard. You get back. This is just a parrot endpoint. So whatever I send to the server, it sends back. So you see like the actual thing is encoded in this kind of insane looking piece. And that is multi-part encoding, which gets more exciting when you have multiple fields. This is the DOM code that gives you multiple fields. So now we have 2 fields. We can fold them in. Wow, my typing is not good. I'm going to blame the delay. We submit that. We get how the multi-part works. So you can have multiple different pieces. The only time we generally do that these days this way is for file uploads. So those get uploaded basically with this text, and then the actual body of the file gets shoved inline, which is a cool hack. But that's basically like, that's how user data goes back and forth to the server. These days, everybody wants to type more fancy things than just straight plain text. There's plenty of exceptions, but even like something that pretends to be plain text, you can @mention someone or like have a link pop in that does something clever. Markdown is trying to do some things about that. Content editable. Who's used content editable? Directly or through a library? Yeah, sweet. So we may have some corrections. If I say something wrong or miss something weird, shout it out and we can test it out. Content editable is a sneaky thing. Basically, all you have to do is set this magic flag, and then the text is editable. So I can now edit the text that's in that div. So I can directly edit it. I can add emojis. In Chrome, for some reason, Command B works, which is kind of cool. It doesn't work in Safari. And it's kind of neat. The way that Chrome does this is quite clever. So if you start with the D and the Y highlight with bolds, and then you take the middle characters and bold them, it smartly collapses it to one element. So there's some cool magic going on behind the scenes of Chrome, because this is literally all the code that is here. right? There's nothing special happening. But Safari doesn't support it. Many other browsers don't. And so if you want to add like a bold toggle, you have to build that logic yourself if you're going to use this thing, or if you're going to use content editable without a layer in between. That gets super complicated. So I built like the easiest possible function that takes a like selection piece and makes it a link tag. It's actually like a pretty straightforward piece of code. There's like handy DOM helpers that let you do this. But if you go across a boundary, it just doesn't work. Like it's more complicated, right? Because if I want to turn S and DI into a link, we have the S here, and we have a DI, and we have a space. And so like, we can't just, well, that's helpful, thanks. We can't just take this piece and make it a link because this part is in a separate part of the DOM tree. And so you can imagine that there's in every editor, medium editor, tiny MCE or whatever, there's some fairly intricate piece of logic that's like looking up the tree to figure out what the start and the end point is, splitting it up, reapplying styles as you go. And so that's quite gnarly. And how you solve that problem basically tells you whether or not the markup that you generate is pretty, right? Like I'm sure people who have worked with older, I'm sure many current WYSIWYG editors have just like absolute trash markup that comes out of it, which probably doesn't matter for the most part, but if you want to translate it to a native client or something that's not actually consuming HTML, you're kind of hosed. Like there's not, like you can take the markup and then like hopefully translate it into something meaningful so you can send it down to your iOS client or whatever. But that's like, it's a challenging thing. The other piece is you can nest content editable true false. So as you go through the layer, you can have like a piece that you can't edit and then a piece inside it that you can edit. And so that's how you have like, there's a picture that you uploaded and you can't like edit that, but you can delete it as a block and you can like edit the title, but you can't like delete the X button or whatever because it's handled separately. So basically there's the more cool the thing is that you're trying to build, the more awful the problem becomes. And the old solutions were quite bad. The first editor that I know of that did it cleverly is the Medium editor. Does anybody know if there was an earlier one that used the technique that I'm about to describe? Basically, Medium was this native editor that actually produced beautiful markup, limited what you can do, so you can't just like write whatever you want. You're very limited to whatever's in their style guides, which is why that blog platform just looked so good initially compared to everything else. Styles have been like locked down quite a bit since then. And what they do is instead of letting you edit the markup directly, every edit that you make to the markup actually edits the data structure underlying it. So if you select a piece of text, it knows in the JSON blob of the thing that you're generating what you're selecting, makes the modification to the underlying data structure, and then passes it forward into content editable. And that lets you limit everything that you can do, and it lets you build more complicated things on top of it. They wrote a really nice article back in 2014. I immediately tried to build it, and it's super annoying. Very, very hard to nail that process for a bunch of reasons. Partially, the selection is hard. There's so many browser-specific details that are just really, really hard. So for example, I'm an Emacs head, not a Vim head. So I've mapped all of my macOS editor commands to be what I expect from Emacs. So if I hit Control-D, I delete forward, right? Which is maybe normal in macOS, but there's other ones that aren't. I think I've Control-W mapped. Yes. So there's a bunch of editor commands that I have encoded that if you were to try to build me an editor that I can type in online, I'm going to hate it because all of my ways of editing text don't work because you have assumed that my key mapping is like normal or whatever. unless you're VS Code, you don't want to re-implement a whole like key binding, key mapping system. So the problems are many, and nailing them is super hard. And so what are the other options? This is one of the rare times when I'm a proponent of a library. So how do you choose? There are so many. And the key features, in my opinion, basically are you want to have a JSON like underpinning, right? Like you want to be able to pull JSON data out of it and either reconstruct DOM out of it or reconstruct something in your like whatever scrolly thing on your native widget, or turn it into a RSS feed, yank the first image and make that the poster image on the headline or whatever. So that's the like most key feature. On top of that, you also want to be able to add your own components, like just limited to bold text, and the other thing is pretty boring. And you want to make sure that the workflow as a developer is reasonable. Like you don't want to have to do a bunch of learning of the underlying system in order to like do what you're trying to do. The alternative is you just go with the funniest name, which is TipTap, which is what I did, and I haven't looked back. So this is a TipTap piece, or this is a TipTap editor on the right. And if we go back, you'll notice on this content editable, if I hit new line, it sticks in divs instead of p tags. You can also do weird stuff like type in a bunch of spaces, and how it handles that is like kind of funny. Like why that way? Ooh. Do I have a Microsoft Word document?
I wasn't actually serious.
Here, we can paste some Google content in there. Whoa, okay, that's a good idea. I like it. Okay, moving on. Maybe. So TipTap is cool. You can do neat stuff like when you hit the enter key, you get p tags, which is what it should be, right? Like that's what we're doing. We're typing on the internet, use p tags. I've used the like basic building blocks. That means that if I type Markdown, it like knows how to do the translation between Markdown and what I'm trying to type. The only weird thing that I noticed as I was actually putting this together is if you make a ordered list, it wraps the content of the list item in a p tag. And it's like one of those transitive dependency things that is like, if you go to the TipTap docs, they're like, we blame this guy over here. It's like, well, that's not helpful. But it's interesting that even when you have really tight control, you'll wind up finding these like, what's going on here? Why is that? The reason in this case is because you are allowed to put like complicated stuff in. Whoa, am I not allowed to put that in? There we go. So like having complicated, am I allowed to put a tab in here? Let's see. No, what about a indented? Nope. Interesting. Oh. Anyway, lost it here. Lost the thread. So TipTap is really cool. It's very easy to build additional things. Kind of the classic example is like an image uploader where you like drag a picture in and it does a fancy upload to somewhere. That's all fine and good. That is the first thing that I did with it. The second thing that I did was I really like geo information. And so I wanted to be able to drag in like a GeoJSON. Where are you, GeoJSON, that I have for this purpose? It's like I want to be able to drag in a GeoJSON file and have it pop in as a, oh no, It's broken. Why is it broken? Let's see how quickly we can fix it. Oh, process is not defined. Cool. Well, let's see. Hold, please. What am I doing here? This was working. Oh, live demos. That's the best. I know. I believe me. That's what matters, right? Go away. I don't want to know everything that's wrong. Oh man. Well, I'm sorry. We can debug it. The demo was supposed to show a bunch of cool points on there. It was very cool. You'll have to trust me on it.
You got a map. That's actually pretty impressive.
It is cool. Like it is almost as good as what I want it to be. But the oh, that's the problem. I was dragging the wrong file in. It's trying to show lines and squares, and it should be trying to display points, and there's no points in the GeoJSON that I sent it. So that's why it doesn't work. I didn't build an actual like generic GeoJSON viewer. I built a thing that renders earthquakes. So if I ran a GIS something company and I was writing blogs about this kind of thing all the time, or I had, as the engineer there, people writing blogs about this stuff, I could have in the edit mode like a style editor on the right that's like, how do you want this specific GeoJSON thing to show up? In this case, I hard coded it because I had other work things to do. But what I think is really incredible is how easy this basic thing was to do. It took me 30 minutes, right, to build the GeoJSON viewer thing. And I am just kind of blown away by how few blogs do this, right? Like if I were at a finance place, I would want to be able to type in like NYSE, like this time period, and have it just like pre-populate with the data from that day. And you can like move around and see stuff. And the amount of interactive, like very, very cool, like New York Times level production value that you can get in like a half an hour of futzing around is really cool. And like, I don't know who runs a CMS-y adjacent thing, but like, do this. Like if you have a client that this would be cool for, like, it's an upsell. I don't know. Is there a reason that people aren't doing this?
Can you be specific about what this is?
So like more interesting than an image or an embedded link or an ad. Yeah, just like you have like a bespoke editor for your domain, right? Like New York Times constantly has like ridiculous articles that are on their website that have really high production value, figures, graphs, interactive, whiz bang, cool stuff. And like, I'm sure they're hiring a bunch of people to do it, or it's just like one guy that has this tool. Like that's also possible. But I don't know, like people, I don't know, probably 10% of this room like builds blogs for people. I don't know. Like, why isn't there more of this? No answers, no reason, go do it. So taking it another step forward, I built a thing that lets you persist the changes to the DOM locally. So I built an endpoint that runs when you like npm run dev the thing, that just stands up a thing that lets you like make changes to your presentation or to a like small like local blog instance or whatever, save it, and then it gets statically rendered next time. And you can make it like read only when you are like on deployment, or you can run it locally. So I want to see something like this for like the headless local, like bloggy things. Because I it's a like really good workflow to like be able to edit nicely and then go back to code and like do the code stuff. That's that. I figure we can go through a little bit of the code. Is that interesting at all? I'm going to assume yes. So here we go.
So you said that was saving things in local store?
No. I'll show exactly how it works. No, it's storing it locally. Yes, exactly. So the way that works is I have final content post, which the URL is just what's here. So it takes a JSON body and just persists it to. Oh yeah, totally. Bear with me. Oh man, now we're bad. We went too far. Is this big enough? Can anybody read it, or should I go bigger? Bigger. Now we just have to shrink all the other stuff. Yeah, so it basically just writes a local file that you can check into source code with the thing, and then what did I just do? And then the get endpoint just returns that file content. And if you were to go crazier, like you could have it edit the actual underlying code if you wanted. Like if it's a normal HTML or some kind of situation like that, you could have it update the actual markdown file or whatever else is like backing the thing. Basically the way that the underlying editor works is there's two concepts for any given piece of content. So there's nodes, which is basically a piece of the background representation of the thing, and then there's whatever component you use to render the piece. And so this is the node component. Most of it is like yanking the file out of the drop event, but basically it's like, what are the coordinates of where you dropped it? Read the file contents, decode it, create a GeoJSON node with the decoded objects and insert it wherever you dropped it, and then like dispatch that transaction. That's the like what happens when you drop. The actual node itself, all it says is like, you have GeoJSON and you don't render HTML because I didn't want to write that. But you can make it like, in this case, you could make it render a statically rendered thing on Mapbox. They have like a JPEG endpoint that you could use to render it. And then on the other side, the component itself is just basically a thin thing that says this is what we're doing, and then a Mapbox object that you just add the GeoJSON object to, and it consumes the attributes of the like underlying thing. This may be getting a little bit in the weeds, but basically like the same thing exists on the React side, where you just like have some mostly plain old JavaScript objects that represent the thing, and then you just render it however you want. And I'm just like so impressed how little code it takes to like render a very cool thing.
So question about that. When you're uploading
Yes.
to your backend, does
I don't do that in this case, but we can open up a code base that does.
Would the text, like, do you have that Mapbox component written into the thing that you upload to yours? Or do you have some other sort of object that gets read out?
Mapbox is only presentational, if that answers your question. So like
You're
there's,
just writing the underlying sort of
There's just like some guts, right? There's like some guts that says like documents can have GeoJSON embedded in them. And when you run into that GeoJSON shell Mapbox map, like with that thing.
So you have a JSON node.
That's exactly what it is, right? Like it's even, you know, it's in here as like nodes, GeoJSON, like, and like all it says is like GeoJSON nodes have a GeoJSON attribute that defaults to an empty object.
Do you know how TipTap compares to Quill? Do you use Quill at all?
Quill, what's that?
It seems similar.
They might both be based on Prose Mirror. Prose Mirror is the thing that does the node side of it.
Yep.
We can look. You don't think so? I remember using it at some point. Here we can just see. But the other one that I'm more familiar with is Slate. I actually did build a thing with Slate, and that was nightmarish compared to this. Quill.js. Have you used Quill? Is that?
Yeah, that's what I asked.
And so it's the same.
Similar, but just maybe different. It doesn't use Prose Mirror.
Mhm.
Like, Prose Mirror is obviously under the hood there.
Yeah. What's your experience been like?
It's basically the same concept. You map, the rendering layer down to a JSON document layer.
Mhm.
You store that JSON document layer. You can find custom nodes
Yep.
as you like, and it's up to you to then, in your code, define the rendering layer for
Yep.
those custom nodes. Or
Yep.
else they will just be absent.
Yep.
So,
And
similar, it seems like.
what did you use it for?
A knowledge base inside of a ticketing system. So a rich text editor for a knowledge.
So like a wiki kind of thing.
Yep, exactly.
Is that any other applications for it, or that was just like?
We built it for our ticketing system
Yep.
from scratch. And yeah.
So you built it in-house for your own company?
We didn't build Quill, but we built.
Well, sorry, the thing.
Exactly.
And how did that work out? Was that a good call, engineering management? Would engineering management smile on that decision?
I think so. It was not as, it took about 2 months of work to get it up and running.
Yeah.
It lasted for 7 years.
Oh, but it ended.
We shut down that piece.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've always been surprised how little time gets spent on stuff like that. Like I've never gotten greenlit for that idea.
Oh yeah, no, it made a difference. It was nice. We wanted to have control over our rendering layer.
Yeah, right.
To do that, we needed to operate at this level.
Yeah.
Be able to define our own custom nodes.
And it's just not that hard, right? It's like, just go, yes.
When you shut it down, what did you do with all the documents that have these like basically meaningless little turds of GeoJSON or whatever they are?
Hey, man.
It's a more complicated question. Our company was acquired, and then our product was repurposed.
Yeah.
Then it was shut down and exported to hell knows. So,
Yeah.
It was gone.
Yeah, what's up?
We just migrated from CK editor to TipTap.
I saw it in your nightmare package.json. Yeah.
So funny. But yeah, TipTap's like so much easier to use than something like CK editor that's on headless. And
Yeah, right.
It's like night and day. Like when we used to budget 3 weeks or something, we can now budget like a couple days.
Yeah. What's a custom component that you built for it? Or have you not?
No, we have financial tables in our editor that you can import in, like
Yes.
your balance sheet.
Mhm.
So like being able to have a nice looking presentation of your balance sheet in
Yeah.
the editor.
And that was awesome for someone, I hope.
Yeah, totally. We write business plans, so
Yeah, I love it.
It was a a requirement, and the way to do it was
Very
so
nice to
easier.
have.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, Word is the like minimum viable product there.
Right.
Or
yeah. And
whatever.
like a generic HTML table is what we used to be able to support.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Any other fun stories about TipTap or yeah?
I've got a question about, so I've used TipTap and we didn't store things in the Prose Mirror JSON format. We stored them as HTML.
Yeah.
The idea was that, when you render it out, you just render it out as HTML. You don't need to go through it.
Mhm.
The reason that was problematic was, of course, that people can put, evil JS code. In.
Yeah.
But I was just curious your thoughts on, do you store it as Prosmir or JSON?
I mean, I'm a huge fan. I'm going to try to see if I can find this code with this very crazy big size here.
I wanted to have it so that all
Here's-
of the things that got stored, like all of the things that got stored out of it were like just pure HTML and could be rendered on their own wherever they
I am not opposed to there being a cache of that, but the reason why I really like the JSON content, this is a Postgres function that examines prose mirror, picks out the first heading, that's your title, picks out the first image, that's your banner image. And so you can just like write, straightforward code that just like finds those things and then they're in your database. And so in principle, if you have it in the HTML version, you can convert it into the JSON format with the backend version of Prose Mirror and then like extract out the things. But having it in JSON on the back end is harder to justify if you're only having web clients. But as soon as you have a like fancy iOS client that just like wants the underlying thing, I don't know. I prefer working with the JSON just because it's.
That's baller right there. I like that.
Oh, thanks.
You can email too, which is HTML.
But not. HTML, but like, right. And that's a great point, right? Because from JSON, you could generate an MJML like thing that then gets turned into like good email or good looking email. That's an excellent reason. Wow, there's a lot of functions. I did not keep this simple.
Have you looked at how many of the modern like cloud-based IDEs, Cloud9?
Ooh, yeah, I
Rooted in this basic
I assume so. Well, in VS Code, right? VS Code is a web thing.
They just have like an AST under some JSON trees or whatever.
Well, I doubt they have the AST. I bet they just have like an array of lines, right? Like,
Well, I don't know. I mean, you've got all the syntactic, highlighting.
Oh, yeah, I'll buy that for sure. Yeah, that's right.
I've always been really like, I
Yeah.
was around with content editable like way back in the day.
Yeah.
And immediately like
Noped
threw
out.
up in the corner.
Yeah, exactly.
And so when I see this stuff online, I'm just like I'm in complete awe of like
Right.
how sophisticated and good it is.
Yeah, right.
It's an amazing experience, but under the hood, like.
Well, and the very cool thing is like the stack that we have now, I mean, whether it's Quill or Prose Mirror plus whatever, like the throw up in a corner level detail is like nicely abstracted away. At least compared to when I was trying to.
Like if I handed you Prose or TipTap or CodeMirror, could you go create VS Code with that?
Sure.
Why don't you just go all in like Google Docs and use Canvas?
Does it really?
Wow.
Oh my God. So does it honor my control keys? I haven't noticed that it doesn't. But how does it know?
Millions of dollars.
Wait, so if you right click inspect to a Canvas element?
Yeah, I mean, in actual Chrome, they.
Well, you can't inspect it.
Command option.
I know. Well, they've got those too, so I have to go. I have to go to wherever that lives up here,
You gotta do it before you open it.
right? There should be something in here.
This was an acquisition too, Google Docs was.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so I click this, right? And then you're right. Yeah, there's no DOM here. Jesus.
Wow.
Check out the stones on them.
They have
Damn.
to do that in order to get around the like massive.
You're right, it doesn't support-
versions and old-
Well, it doesn't support my editing keys. I just don't remember being mad at it before.
They're rendering your blinking cursor.
God. I remember there was actually people did that for Flipbook on iOS. They used maybe it was like the only decent scrolling performance on a mobile device back in the day, right? I mean, it was like they were getting 60 FPS scrolling through Canvas. And now I'm sure everybody wants to use Geo or WebGL for everything. Wow, learned something. Thank you for that. I love it.
I remember reading, part of that also was to get font rendering the same across devices. So there are a million and one reasons why they're using Canvas.
And they just have the engineering hours to make it work. That is amazing. Sweet. Cool. I have a question. Who's done internationalization? Okay, I'm trying to figure out. We're gonna switch to. Go back to that account here. Oh, but I ditched that.
Yeah.
This was ill-conceived. I'm sorry. We're gonna call it.
Just go back to your
Go back to displays.
displays. Yeah. You're just gonna have to I don't know, reshare or. There you go. That one.
Oh, yeah. There we go. There we go. Okay, so the question that I have, do I trust the authors? Yes, I trust the authors. I've been struggling with internationalization for approximately my whole career. And I'm curious why we don't do it like this. Like, why can't we just have a component that takes the string and translates it? Okay. Why doesn't everybody do it this way?
If you're not using Vue.
What do you mean? I mean, I wrote the thing that does this for me in half an hour or 2 hours earlier today. I'm just wondering why nobody else does it this way.
Oh, it's been done many times. Format.js can do it. What was the original
Format.js.
one? I'm blanking, the one that we ditched because it was crap.
Are there heinous?
The original one for React. I'm trying to remember.
I was gonna say the Google dropdown where you select it and it translates the whole thing.
Oh yeah, we were talking about that thing earlier.
So basically, the reason is because you need to have your compiler deal with. You need to compile it out first before it actually goes to the compiler.
Yep.
You need now a two-step build process for
Yep.
this, and it's a pain in the ass.
All right, sweet. Any other? Is there am I going to run into problems
so at
in?
Twitter, we rewrote the entire. Globalize. That's what it was. React Globalize was what we were using. Basically, the maintainers of it stopped updating it, and so we had to write our own, and they wouldn't make it compatible with the version of what it had. 4 or 5 or something like that.
Interesting.
So at Twitter, we ended up rewriting the entire thing, the entire stack, and building it out, and we still supported that. So there was like a translate component, which was
Cool.
not like a real component, but using Babel. So we
Yep.
go through like one Babel process, find through the abstract syntax tree, every instance of, you import, translate, potentially import, translate as T from our special
Yep.
package.
Yep.
Pull out those strings, send them to the JSON file that gets uploaded to the API backend for translation. And when you actually go to build for deployment, we pull down the translated JSON files and
Right.
check them in place. So in that compilation step, though, we actually remove that translate component.
Of course.
So it's just
Yeah.
after that.
Right.
Totally can do it if you want to hook into your compiler.
Okay, so like compiler tooling is just like good enough that 2 hours of me and ChatGPT could like get something working.
It's going to take you 5 weeks.
I did it earlier today.
Just to be clear, the difference is like you can have a bona fide React component that, where you've got your content and, it goes into the translation of the table and it actually renders the translated string. But if you want to be at production level,
Right. If you want to be at production level.
you don't want to have to, you want to actually inline all that stuff as part of the build process as opposed to doing it at runtime on the client.
And
Are you making a separate
ideally
bundle?
what you're doing is you're building separate targets for each language.
Of course, but you can do that easily with like the tree shaking and ES
Say
build.
this word easily.
Yeah, okay.
Are you asking why it's hard?
No, he's saying he's
Why
saying
it
it's
should
easy.
be.
Like you're saying he should be.
I'm just
asking why it's
curious
hard.
why it should, why it's easy is the wrong word for it. Yeah. I mean,
I think fair enough. It is kind of like me, just like effing around a little bit. Like,
I mean, the question is, do you care about performance? And how?
what am I going to get burned by? What am I going to get burned by that I haven't thought of? Like, what was a surprise?
If you support 50 languages,
Okay.
you're gonna have 50 strings
For every string.
for every string.
Right. So you need to be able to support substitution and custom components in the thing.
Right, but that goes up to your client, like all 50 of those strings.
Why? Why don't you just package them in separate modules?
Because now you have to asynchronously determine which one you're going to load. And now you're slowing down your loading and rendering of your site.
In principle, you can do it on the server side with the accept language header, right?
Don't use that.
Don't use that. But then you're
Use
stuck
that
doing
as-
it on the client
use that
anyway.
as your first hint if you don't have another hint that the user has explicitly told you what they want.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Yeah.
is that a standard, like, we all hate the accept language header?
It is not always correct.
Why not?
Because
I'm
you
sorry.
can set multiple languages on your system of what you like. You're going to get a whole bunch of different languages. So if
The
you
first
take
one is the
accept-
preference, right?
It can be sometimes.
Okay.
But the user should, the user's choice, manual choice should always be the first thing that you go.
Sure.
So therefore, you also need to drop down, and now you also need a way to swap between languages.
Mhm.
And you need to determine, are you going to be able to do that on the fly, or do you need to load an entire different package for this? And what does that translation look like? Are you going to reload the entire page?
Mm-hmm.
And that seems like,
Yeah, you're going to want to.
have the wrong language there.
But I mean, like fundamentally, you have to make the call on the client if you have an override, unless you have it in the database, and then you can make it on the server again, right? Fundamentally, you're just mapping strings to like keys to strings in the user's language.
So the other thing to think about is if you're doing this as like you put all your strings in a JSON file and you're injecting those in at runtime, are all of your strings for your entire application going to be in one JSON file?
I don't want them to be. I want to
How
build.
are you going to know which JSON file they're supposed to be in?
I can build the list of strings that are going to be needed at compile time.
No, I'm saying, so you have you have language EN.
Yep.
Is that one JSON file?
No, it's in a database somewhere. Like it's a key thing mapping.
When you send it to your client, are you building an entire separate application?
At compile time,
At compile time?
at compile time, I can get a list of all the keys I'm going to need for the thing that I'm
And you're
compiling.
injecting those directly into your compile code.
That is one solution.
Well, that's what I'm asking. Which way are you going? Are you injecting those into your compile code? In which case you have.
I haven't yet, but that's what I want to do.
You have one separate application for like every single file. You have different bundles for every language. That's the.
Don't you want that?
It's overkill, and now you're doing n number of builds.
Well, you're compiling those files. You don't have to rebuild everything. Like you just have like en.json, JP or whatever.
That's what you just said you're not doing. You're injecting it directly into the JavaScript code.
Oh, I see what you're saying. No, they would be a separate
So now
pre.
you have en.json. En.json is now 70 kilobytes gzip.
Okay,
Does that you're going to require that on top of everything?
not necessarily. We can break it up into different pieces depending on what your entry point is.
How do you know where your entry point is? But
That's the compiler knows
this
that.
is where you said it was easy. But
Totally.
There are many.
Yeah, fair enough. We're getting to the meat of it. I think that's good.
If you had one JSON per file, so
Um,
you're like lazy loading your files, you have
And now you're
JSON.
adding network requests and round trips.
Most companies don't care about Twitter's load time now. Like if you're just want to enterprise SaaS platform, like
Yeah, I mean,
you get an extra 500 milliseconds.
But fundamentally, what I'm hearing is this is not a ridiculous, dumb idea that I'm going to get bitten by. Like at worst case, I'm going to wind up with something that is as bad for performance as Next-i18n with slightly better usability.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like to me.
Okay, I love it.
Have you ever has anyone here used like I think Chrome supports it, but like the browser. It's like a browser standard language. You can do like send an en.json to be used in your app in the browser.
Anyway.
I'll have to look it up.
Anyway, thanks for bearing with me on that one. Thanks for hanging out. Hope that was interesting. Thanks to organizers and sponsors and all the rest of it. Nice. Awesome. And I'll let you know if I get burned. Awesome. Right on. I already know what that